Okay, so in this video comparison, I really wanted to focus on 4K at 30 frames per second. And we're starting in low light footage right away. And later on in this video, we'll also compare performance in even lower light conditions, as well as some indoor daylight scenarios. Now, one of the key main differences you should know right off the bat is the 16 Pro Max is actually locked at 4K 30 frames per second, while the iPhone XR can record 4K at up to 60 frames per second. So if recording 4K at 60 FPS is important for your specific filming needs, that's already something major to consider. Now, low light video is one of the biggest challenges for smartphone cameras, and here's where we start to see major differences between the iPhone XR and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a larger sensor that captures more light, meaning specifically less noise and sharper details if you really look closely in darker environments. Apple's Deep Fusion processing really helps shadows and improves overall clarity, making nighttime footage more usable. And the iPhone XR can kind of be seen to struggle a little bit in low light capture. But I think personally it's holding its own pretty well, especially in this scenario where you see the brighter lights in the backgrounds. Yes, the 16 Pro Max is obviously excelling in this specific filming scenario, but it's very, very close, especially for a phone that's so much older and was released in 2018. Now, the iPhone XR has a 12 megapixel rear camera, 4K video up to 60 frames per second. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a 48 megapixel main camera and advanced sensor technology, 4K up to 30 frames per second with enhanced video stabilization. And in these scenes, you can kind of see the stabilization shine a little bit in the iPhone 16 Pro Max when you really look carefully. Like you see, as I'm walking, you can kind of see my steps a little bit more when we jump over to the iPhone XR footage. I feel like this lands you with a cleaner end result. And here, if you look at the greens, you can see both phones are struggling to autofocus during the movement, but obviously the 16 Pro Max has that video processing, which is coming into effect, making it seem smoother. Now, moving on to footage compared between the two devices in a daylight indoor filming scenario, I really want to touch on the difference in colors. You can kind of see the XR has a little bit of a warmer kind of processing to it, whereas the 16 can appear to be over-processed, just in my personal opinion. Now, I know seeing is not necessarily as subjective as hearing, but it's very close. And if you're looking in daylight, like kind of look at the green right here on the XR. I kind of like the XR green a little bit better. And if you look at the backpack and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, I kind of like how the XR is representing the contrast a little bit better. Now, putting these two devices head to head in an even lower light filming scenario, you can kind of see where the 16 starts to shine now a little bit and the XR is struggling. Definitely brighter, and you can notice the stabilization a lot better in these low light filming scenarios. When pushed to extreme low light conditions, the difference is even more noticeable. The iPhone 16 Pro Max uses advanced processing to maintain sharpness, while the iPhone XR loses significant detail and introduces more noise. This is crucial if you plan to record at night or in scenarios where light is low and limited. The iPhone 16 Pro Max in extreme low light definitely represents less digital noise, keeping the footage clean. The stabilization is better. It has better color reproduction, and you can kind of see how it's avoiding unnatural shifts in coloration. Even at this very slow speed, you can really see what I'm talking about. Dynamic range control kind of prevents blown out highlights from nearby light sources, whereas the XR just appears dimmer when compared in this exact scenario. The XR will show heavier noise in darker regions of the frame, softening the details due to aggressive noise reduction, color shifts leading to less of a natural look. As I'm kind of panning, it maintains brightness, but I feel like the stabilization, even though both devices are kind of trying their hardest, you can see as I'm panning here from left to right, at the same FPS, the iPhone 16 Pro Max maintains a smoother overall result. Look at this car passing from left to right. And even if we slow it significantly, there's a lot more processing involved in what you get overall after the fact with the iPhone 16 Pro Max in comparison to the XR, at least in my opinion. Now, processing aside, for the overall end result, on both phones compared filming at 30 FPS, you can really see the difference in how the 16 Pro Max is just able to maintain a smoother result. Like as I move here from left to right, you can see the XR is struggling with brightness, getting brighter and darker, whereas the 16 Pro Max maintains that kind of like default brightness. You see here as the car passes with the shadow from my feet. Watch this again. As I go from left to right here, it's just obviously superior with the 16 Pro Max. And this is so hard for smartphone cameras to do in low light conditions where bright lights are entering in, and then you throw movement into the equation. I mean, definitely superior in regards to what it can do when it comes to the 16 Pro Max just producing a better end result. Now, putting these devices head to head in an indoor, completely day-lit filming comparison, you can kind of see now definitely the XR's stabilization is not struggling as much as it was in low light. And I mean, yes, the 16 Pro Max is definitely holding sharpness, and you can really see that stabilization slightly come out on top in comparison to the XR, but not as noticeable or as predominant as we experienced in the lower light filming conditions. Now, what the XR is going for, price-wise, is going to be a huge factor if indoor filming and 4K 60 frames per second is important to you. But I mean, if you want that enhanced stabilization with the superior processing, 16 Pro Max would be definitely, I feel like, the way to go in this usage case scenario at least. But if you're filming a lot of low light or let's say dim litten conditions, 16 Pro Max or maybe slightly newer than the XR might be something to consider. Now, a good way to look at it is look at the price gap and try to equate that to value. So if this is how you're filming most of the time, that gap may be too big price-wise to equate to the actual value you're getting in difference. You can really see the details start to come out in comparison, especially when we slow it down. See how the 16 Pro Max maintains the details even at a slower speed? Whereas the XR, you're going to see now a lot of noise in comparison to that. Now, I know I didn't cover everything, but I wanted to give you guys at least enough footage in 4K 30 frames per second to make a decision when comparing these two devices. But I mean, which one are you leaning towards? And if there's anything else you notice, please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see an in-depth review of the iPhone XR in 2025, you can click the thumbnail right here. Appreciate all the support. I'll see you guys in the next one.